There are many things to consider when building Sung Jinwoo in solo leveling Arise, which are things like his stats, his skills, his weapons, etc., which is why in today's video I'll be doing a complete guide into Sung Jinwoo and how to best utilize these features. So let's kick things off with his stats. So when you level up as Jinwoo, you can acquire stat points which you can use to invest into all of his stats, being strength, vitality, agility, intelligence, and perception, which all have their own benefits. And just keep in mind, depending on what kind of build and weapons and artifact sets that you're using on Jinwoo will depend on what kind of gear sets that you might want to run. But overall, I think the two best stats in the game are going to be his precision stat, as well as also his regular attack stat as well. As when it comes to his sort of attack stat, all of his skills being apart from, well, it depends on what kind of actually a version of a skill you have, because some skills can, well, they pretty much primarily always will scale off his regular attack stat. But there are some like niche cases where you have skills like Phantom, for the Phantom version of Mutilate, where you can scale off of his attack as well as HP as well, but I'm pretty sure this is the only skill in the game that does that, so there's not really much to worry about that. And then we have the Perception stat. This stat basically increases your minimum damage dealt to enemies, and it would just increase that, as I assume there's just like a certain threshold of damage that you can, or like a range of damage that you can go between. And essentially the precision stat will just make that much more narrower, so you can get a lot more consistent damage, which will overall just give you a relatively-ish flat just damage increase pretty much. And the reason why this stat is so good is, well, one, it's an extremely rare stat for you to gain, as you can only really gain this stat off of weapons that have been duped out, as you can see right here, or you can get it through actually just investing your stat points into Jinwoo, whereas things like additional mana points, as well as crit rate, crit damage, defense HP, and also even attack, you can just get from your things like your gear pieces and stuff like that. And then next up we have all of his skills. So when it comes to Jinwoo's basic skills, I believe he has 10 in total, so which ones are the ones that you're going to want to invest into most? As also with his skills, you can also just level them up to increase their damage and stuff like that. So I think the most important skills you're going to want to level up are skills that deal break damage, as break damage is going to be some of the most important things in the game, as you want to be able to deplete their break meter as much as possible, so then you can get a free stun on the boss or enemy, so then you can do a bunch of damage afterwards, which means skills like multi-strike as well as death stance as well is another fantastic one, as this, well, multi-strike has medium break damage and death stance has heavy break damage, which is amazing. And then you also have crushing blow, which obviously depending on which runes you have on these skills, their break damage could vary and stuff like that. And then the other skills you're going to want to invest into are going to be your QTE skills, which are Shadow Step, Collapse, and then also Death. And the reason why all three of these skills are all very valuable and are definitely skills you should consider leveling up is because your quick time event or QTE skills are skills that you'll be able to use through any stage, and they'll always be with you ready to use. And then onto his two ultimates, you have Shadow Tragedy, which is the first one that you get, and then also Truth Mutilate. And you'll notice that I haven't leveled up Shadow Tragedy, but I have leveled up Truth Mutilate quite a lot. And this is because Shadow Tragedy just as a whole isn't very good at all, as if we look at Truth Mutilate, it does, well, for the same cooldown of 60 seconds as well, and obviously you're going to be using the same amount of ult charge. On level 7, it will do 5,113.64% on level 7, and if we go to say, if we wanted to level up this, the other ultimate to level 7, it would only do 4,115.49% of Jinwoo's attack as damage, which does mean the ultimate Shadow Tragedy, in my opinion, there's just no point in leveling up or investing into it, because it's just not really needed at all, because once you get this ultimate, or this ultimate, it's just so much better. So back onto regular skills, and the next sort of skills you're going to want to also level up and invest into are going to be skills that do a really good job at taking out lots of different enemies. So skills like the Commander's Touch are fantastic, as this is one with my rune right here, and as you'll see when we use it, it just creates an absolutely massive like black hole which the enemies get sucked into, so then you can group them all together to do a ton of damage. And then we also have skills like Mutilate, especially this one, Stroke of Lightning, is a fantastic one, but also regular Mutilate is also relatively useful as well, as you can do a ton of AoE damage with it. And then we have the Gale version of Vertical Arts, this is another fantastic one. And then Bombardment for Dagger Toss as well is another fantastic one to help you do a bunch of AoE damage. So also in solo leveling Arise, all of Jinwoo's different skills can all have runes attached to them, and there's 3 different rarities of runes. You have the blue ones, then you have the purple ones, and then the yellow ones or gold ones. And to get these runes, you're going to need rune fragments, as basically you can get them from all of these methods here. And essentially you can basically fuse these sharp or like fragments together to basically have a chance at making all of these ones right here, although you can't make legendary ones yet. As in order to make legendary ones, what you're going to have to do is, unfortunately, you're going to have to use duplicate versions of, I believe, purple ones, which is going to be really difficult to get in order for you to even have a chance, which I believe is a 25% chance of getting them. So these are going to take a very long time for you to get. But these runes are honestly the best thing about these skills, as it will give you different types of animations and stuff like that, as well as different effects on these skills, as also a lot of them will have their own element attached to it, which will make them deal that elemental, like, so for example, I got this one, which will deal fire elemental damage, whereas there are also some other ones, like this one right here, which just don't do any elemental damage and will just have regular bonus effects. But these runes are 100% very key in when building Jinwoo, and depending on what stage you're fighting, for example. So for example, this stage right here, the recommended attribute is fire, as the incoming fire attacks will deal 150% extra damage. So when it comes to all the skills I'm going to want to equip, I should consider equipping all of the skills, or like the versions of these skills that will have the fire element. So I think that pretty much covers everything in terms of skills. If you have any questions about anything to do with this that you'll see in the video, then don't forget to ask me in the comments down below, and I will be sure to answer them. But the next thing you can do with Jinwoo is going to be his blessing stones, and one of the best blessing stones that you're going to get straight off the bat is going to be the daily quest completion, and you get this one alongside tenacity for free. These are the two free ones that you do get. And the reason why daily quest completion is so good is it basically gives you a second chance and a second life, as whenever your HP falls to 1, you'll become immortal for 4 seconds and then recover 2,000 of your HP immediately. And then there's some other effects as well, but that's the most important part about it, and this is something that's really good against hard bosses, and especially story bosses that you'll face throughout the game, and this is really useful. And then tenacity is just a 20% damage reduction when you have 30% or less of your max HP, so it's not really crazy, but it can be useful. But those aren't all of the ones that you can obtain in the game, as just like runes, there's different rarity versions of all of them, which is obviously great, and pretty much the way that you obtain these is going to be very similar to how you obtain runes. As if we go to fuse, you'll also be able to see there's the blessing stone powder, and essentially what you're going to need is this powder of blessing, which you can get through these methods right here, as well as other methods like achievements and stuff like that. And then you can use them to merge them together to try and get a rune, well, basically out of all of these, and then you have a 2% chance to get up to a purple one, and then you can also trade in duplicate ones as well to get epic versions of them as well. And then to get legendary rarity ones, you'll have to then put in the purple versions or the epic rarity ones of them into here, so then you can actually have a 25% chance to try and get yourself one of these. So yeah, it's going to take you a very long time to get it. And then you can also have up to 4 different blessing stones active at a time, so that's pretty much 4 free passives right there. And these slots will always unlock with a different level that you get. I believe you get I think you get the first one at the start of the game, then the second one at 50, the third one at 60, and then the fourth one at level 70. So when it comes to using all of these blessing stones, I'd recommend that you just experiment with different ones. As for example, I got this one, double-edged sword. This will increase my attack stat and also my enemy's attack stat, like that. As all these blessing stones, just like skills, are going to be useful in different scenarios. So yeah, just make sure you are experimenting around with them and try and find your own different combos and stuff like that you might find really useful and you'll enjoy a lot. So next up, we have all of Jinwoo's weapons, and there's an absolute ton of Jinwoo weapons for you to use in the game, and you're going to definitely need multiple weapons of different elements within the game. As you've seen previously, there's different enemies that have different weaknesses, which means you're going to need different elemental weapons in order to deal with those elemental weaknesses. So in terms of all the free weapons that you can actually get 2 copies of the free SSR Shadow Scythe, which is fantastic, and then you can get the Lustrous Dragon Sword as well for free, I believe. And then I think you also get the Rock Golem Hammer, as well as 2 free copies of Karsuka's Venom Fangs. That's 1 free dupe right there. And then I believe you get a Kim Sang-shik sword as well, I believe, for free. You get one of those for free, I'm pretty sure. And that's pretty much it in terms of weapons that you get for free for Jinwoo. So if you rerolled for an SSR weapon and then maybe like a character or something, then you can also get the Shadow Scythe as well, and then you'll be able to have 2 SSR weapons in your loadout, which is really cool. But if you don't have any of these SSR weapons, what are the best SR weapons for each element? So for the wind element, I think West Wind is going to be the best one, as you can get a pretty sizable damage increase as well as a very high damaging skill. Then for light weapons, I think Radiru Family Use Longbow is going to be the best one, as you can get a free up to 80% damage increase. Although the Lustrous Dragon Sword as well as also the Demon Knight Spear, I think are both completely fine weapons. And then for dark weapons, I think the best SR weapon for that is going to be the Black Hawk. And then for water-based weapons, I think the Frostbite Falchion is a really good choice. But all the other ones like Naga Guardian's Dragon's Trident is also fine, as well as if you want to, say some of your materials and not hopefully try and get lucky with some pulls on some SL weapons, you can definitely also use Casca's Venom Fang as well. And then finally for the fire element, the Orb of Avarice is going to be your best one, although it does have a lot of mana point consumption, it does give you a lot of damage increases, so this is going to be your best fire weapon. But a lot of these SL weapons are 100% all usable and useful in their own ways, as well as like Barika's Dagger can also be really useful if you have like a back attack damage build, which is going to be great. And I'd probably then say the biggest mistake I made when playing this game is I've just leveled up a ton of weapons, as you can see right here, as if I didn't and just save some of the materials, I could maybe have 2 really useful weapons at a very high level that covers a good amount of elements but can also just do a crazy amount of damage. So the final thing about Jinwoo is going to be his artifacts, and these are going to be farmed in Encore and Instance dungeons as well. And when it comes to farming Encore missions, I would highly recommend you farm the first 2 bosses once you're at the start of your game or whatever. So you're going to be farming the Blue Venom Fanged Kasika as well as the Viridescent Mage Flores, as the end stages of these only have 51,500 power, and you can relatively somewhat easily get some of the highest rarities of gear. And when it comes to things like level 55 legendary equipment and then also level 35 legendary equipment, I'm pretty sure the only difference between them is that the level 55 equipment will always have a higher main stat, but I think the substats can always be relatively similar, so that's why you don't really need to go ahead and jump the gun to go farm the harder bosses. So you can very easily farm a level 35 legendary gear set whilst having really good substats and also decent main stats in general as well, and then still have a very strong Jinwoo. And then in terms of what actual gear sets you want to use on him, I'd say the best gear sets, or at least at the early points in the game, and just in general, are going to be the gear sets that you can somewhat use that are very universal in what scenarios they can be used in. As I think the 2 best gear sets for him, especially early on, and just gear sets that can be used very, very generally, are going to be the Toughness gear set for the crit bonuses, as well as Solid Analysis to get more damage against enemies in the break state, as well as dealing more break effect as well. And then you also have the Armed gear set, as like I said before, pretty much 99% of his skills all scale off of attack, so you can get the attack increase, as well as the ability to ignore 15% of the target's defense and attacks as well. And then once you've done that, you can then somewhat focus on some of the more niche gear sets like Solid Foundation if you want to run a basic and core attack build, or something like the one-hit kill gear set where you can get a bunch of ultimate bonuses as well. And then the next tip I would give is that I would definitely recommend going always for the 4-set effect on Jinwoo, pretty much for any gear set that you're going to want to put on him, as you do get much more power from having a 4-set bonus as opposed to having 2-set bonuses, for example. And when it comes to the actual specific pieces of gear, especially if you're farming level 35 gear, then I wouldn't really necessarily worry about too much what your substats are going to be, as pretty much you're just going to gatekeep your progression a lot if you're going to just try and get the perfect substance. As I would only really recommend doing it on like the level 55 gear pieces, as those are overall going to be the best gear pieces you'll get. So if you're going to worry about substats, only worry about them for the highest level of gear, as you're progressing through the game. There's not really much point worrying about pieces of gear that you're going to eventually replace anyways. And the reason why I mentioned before that you want a somewhat universal gear set is that actually unequipping pieces of gear actually costs you money, although it only costs you money if you've actually leveled up the pieces of gear, but still, this is really, really bad. So hopefully by the time the game actually globally comes out, well, hopefully that feature will be removed, because it's just really, really bad. So hopefully this video ages pretty well. Then when it comes to accessories, all the same principles applies to all, with also just the regular pieces of gear as well, as pretty much all of the accessory sets are fine on Jinwoo, but the only one I wouldn't say you should use is Outstanding Connection, as I'm pretty sure Jinwoo just physically can't benefit from the 2-set as well as the 4-set effect as well, as you need to tag out, which Jinwoo can't do. So things like the Expert gear set I've got on right here are fantastic, they can be useful. And then you've got things like Champion on the field as well as Executioner, and then I believe there's also Berserker as well. This one is also fine as well. So there you have it, that is my complete guide to Sung Jinwoo and Solo Leveling Arise. He's such an in-depth character, there's so much, so many things, so much you can do with him. He's so cool in this game. But either way, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you found it useful or just entertaining in general, then do not forget to like and subscribe, as it helps a ton, and I'll see you in the next video. Peace!